Welcome to Brain Wellness, the podcast. I'm your host, Mandy NP. Each episode will bring you a new topic or interview related to brain health and wellness as part of my mission to help you on the path to a healthier, happier brain. So, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. My guest today is Dr. LJ Johnson. She's a women's hormone coach specializing in endometriosis, PCOS, and fibroids. LJ has worked in the women's health and fitness industry for over 20 years while overcoming her own diagnosis of endometriosis. LJ's passion is to empower, motivate, and educate all women so that they too can have quality of life despite their symptoms or diagnosis. Welcome, Dr. LJ.
Thank you, Mandy. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I love that last line of your introduction, helping people to live despite their diagnosis. And that's a huge passion of mine as well, because just because you have a diagnosis, that does not define you. You can make life what it is, what you choose it to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes we need that reminder because, I always try to tell my patients, that's one of my favorite lines. And the other one is, your doctor may have given you the diagnosis, but you control the prognosis. And we have to remind ourselves of that. I mean, I'll be very transparent. This morning, I may have woke up with a little bit of headache and I'm like, look here, I can sit in a headache and be like, oh, this is why I didn't get everything done. Or I was like, I need to ramp up my little detoxification pathways, bring in some additional water, bring in my detox tea and keep pushing and just remind myself that I'm like, okay, even though these diagnoses are here, endo, whatever else, I cannot let that control and dictate every freaking movement of every freaking day. Like it is just not going to be a thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always start off my first question. What's your story? What's your background? Why does brain health interest you? But also with you, why does hormone health interest you?
Absolutely. So my story starts, I know we were talking a little bit before the podcast. It took me 16 years to be properly diagnosed with endometriosis. And so it's really interesting. Like I said, as I was in my transparent moment this morning, woke up this morning with a headache. That's a little bit of what we're going to talk about. All the things I'm going to give you the tips. Your girl had to do those this morning, wearing a castor oil pack as we speak, right? So sometimes we got to do the not so sexy stuff to lean into our sexy. But it was 16 years of feeling like I was crazy, being told that I was crazy, hating my body, hating the medical system, the medical system that I was a part of. It was miserable. I mean, at the age of 14, I started having debilitating periods. Despite the debilitating periods, I was having nosebleeds. I was coughing up blood. I was passing out during my period. And all of these things that I was just like, oh, when that time of the month comes, this is just part of what it's supposed to be, not knowing that it wasn't normal. And I think a lot of people, especially women of color, we just normalize this pain, like this is part of our cape. We put on this superwoman cape, we fly out and we save everyone else as we're suffering inside. And so for me personally, I was suffering in silence for years. And so really once I got my diagnosis, I had to kind of take a step back because I'm like, okay, all of these things that I've been preaching and traveling, for example, over exercising, working out, if you want to lose some extra weight, just exercise more. That wasn't working for me anymore. I was packing pounds on. I mean, very humbling experience. Went to a conference and someone's congratulating me on being pregnant. And I'm like, I'm not pregnant. This is actually what we call endo belly. And I've just packed on 20 pounds in the last 6 months. But don't forget, eat that chicken breast and broccoli and lose that weight. P.S. That wasn't working for me anymore either, right? So after I got diagnosed, I had to kind of step back and once again, stop hiding in plain sight. All of the things that I was preaching and teaching stopped working for me. And so I realized that yes, endometriosis is a chronic illness. There's technically no cure. I am definitely in remission, living my best life, pain-free, zero issues when it comes to menstruation and my period and my health. However, I had to kind of retrain and relearn. And so that's what really shifted my entire practice. I mean, once I healed myself naturally, I couldn't go back in my practice, giving the same fitness tips, giving the same nutrition tips, the whole scarcity mindset, the biggest one, you want to lose weight. We want to have this aesthetic, but it was like deep down inside in all honesty, when I was at my thinnest body fat, I may have looked perfect, but inside that was when my endometriosis was wreaking havoc on my body. I was always in a flare. You either see me on TV given 3 tips to be healthy, or I was in the hospital recovering, right? So that I could push my body to the next level. So it is my passion. I really, really, really am passionate about helping people get in the driver's seat of their health. And I always tell people, it's not the high horse that I come from of this is what I learned and I'm talking down. I come from that been there, done that horse. I come from the low horse. Like I tried all the medical misconceptions. I tried pharmaceuticals. I tried everything. And so it's really about letting people know that you have options. It's just sometimes we need that guidance and we need that been there, done that knowledge to take us to the next level.
I love asking the question of where people come from, because it's always I think the best practitioners are the ones that have been there and we've experienced it. We know it firsthand, and we can help our patients through it because we've been there. So
absolutely.
So I hear that story over and over again where people are working in the field that they were affected by. And I had a similar really long journey to get my diagnosis of endometriosis as well. Mine ran in my family. So I'm the youngest of 5 girls. We all ended up with endometriosis. So it was just phenomenal that every single last one of us did. And I started having issues, never had a normal period in my life. And my middle child, we struggled getting pregnant with him. It took about a year and a half. And my OB thought it was endometriosis, but we weren't sure. And she didn't want to try to do any kind of diagnostic testing because it might make it difficult to try to have another child. And it was during the delivery and pregnancy with my last child that we really got that diagnosis. And it was eye-opening because I had spent years trying to figure out what the heck is going on with my body. They thought I had IBS. I thought I had all sorts of other things going on. And really it was the endometriosis. So it's that personal connection definitely is there for the conversation today. So I thank you for being here so we can talk about this more. And of course, my big thing is brains. So you mentioned headaches. How else do our reproductive hormones affect our brains?
And that's a really good question. So when we think of brain health, I know most people for women's health, they're like, I can't remember anything and I have brain fog. Those are the two things. But we have to remember that and not really what people want to hear, but I'm like, work with me here. We have to really remember that the brain fog, the headaches, all of those symptoms, they're really just symptoms. It's your body giving you a check engine light. What I see a lot in my practice, what I've dealt with a lot personally, is hormonal imbalances. And so I don't want to demonize estrogen, because as soon as I say estrogen dominance, everyone's like, oh, I hate estrogen. No, you don't. It is your go-go fuel. It's just when you have too much of a good thing, that's when you possibly will have some estrogen dominance. And when that progesterone is not balanced, that's where you start having those side effects. Maybe you've got, period issues. Maybe you've got the hot flashes, the brain fog. Maybe it's not the brain fog, but it's like the brain that just can't quite get going. It needs a little extra caffeine. It needs a little extra supplements. And so there's nothing wrong with bringing all those things in, but we have to remember that if we balance our hormones, and I'm going to kind of put hormone balance and gut health, because I think I always like to say the gut health is really the foundation. And I've been there, right? The hormones are out of balance, painful periods, painful sex, horrible brain fog. And I'm like, what can I do to balance my hormones? What tea, what juice, what detox? That's all fine and great. But if you don't have that strong foundation, which is that gut health, if that gut health is not there, then you're not really ready to build on with the hormone health, right? Working on the thyroid, the sex hormones, etc. So once you really, I hate to say that, but get that gut health in control and then really start to balance the hormones. And a lot of people are just estrogen dominant. Now that could be something where, they're on high estrogen because possibly you're doing birth control or hormonal contraceptives or something like that, and not demonizing that as well. It may be part of your healing journey, but you have to remember that those synthetic hormones, may it be turning on your period, turning off your period, kind of changing the gears of your period, it really is your 5th vital sign. And so you need to be able to have that coming in and, in naturally, rather than us trying to play God, which like I said, we do that sometimes. But circling back to the estrogen dominance, when you're estrogen dominant and you are deficient on progesterone, you're going to lack some of that, oomph. You're going to lack some of that brain health. And so you start looking at that brain fog. Now, one thing I will add in as well is that sometimes people can still have the headaches and the brain fog and be high on progesterone, but also if you're dealing with that, I can almost bet money there's definitely something going on with your gut. Probably a little bit of candida or yeast or fungus kind of overgrowing in there. The other thing that I see when we're dealing with just the brain fog and the loss of memory, and happens to the best of us, right? Hopefully it won't happen to me during this podcast. Like I said, I'm still on the journey. I have not arrived. I am still putting in the work. The other thing is our thyroid hormones, right? So we want to think about sex hormones, and everyone's like, okay, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Trust me, there's way more than that, but those are like the three heavy hitters. But then on the thyroid health as well, if your thyroid is not showing up and showing out, your metabolism, your brain synapses, like everything isn't just really firing together. So those are the biggest thing that I see, you know, maybe having that estrogen dominance, that lack of progesterone. And then on the other hand, with the thyroid issues, typically when you are hypothyroid, which means a sluggish thyroid. So there's hyperthyroid where your thyroid's showing up and showing out and doing all the things, right? A little too much. Then there's the hypothyroid, which is a diagnosis I still manage. I'm still healing naturally, where my thyroid's like, I'll show up, but maybe I'll only give you 10%. But you're like, this to-do list needs 100%. Like I really need to be awake and, you know, firing and everything like that. So looking at the estrogen and the progesterone, and then looking at the thyroid are the two biggest things that I see that really play in. Also with that lack of motivation, when your brain isn't firing, you're not able to concentrate. And we've all been there, right? You've got this big list of things to do. The kids are at school or you're at work and you're ready to go. And then you're like, who am I? Where am I? What am I supposed to be doing? Even though the to-do list is there, you can't quite get it to work. And so that's what it looks like when you're dealing with the hormonal imbalance.
Yeah. Yep. And we see that a lot, but sometimes people don't identify what's causing that. And they might point to all sorts of different things in their life and not realize that it is their hormones that are out of whack.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's the best way that they can help to identify that in their life?
Symptoms are the biggest thing. So this is my thing. I love when we advocate for ourselves, but sometimes we don't really have a log of the symptoms. I know. As soon as you hear journal, you're like, oh gosh, the eye roll. But I'm telling you, not necessarily a journal of every single morsel of food that goes in your mouth, 10 to 15 this, 10, 16 that, but having an idea of, hey, I had really horrible brain fog the last time I had a period, or when I was ovulating, or when I had that crazy back pain or that pelvic pain or that painful sex. I also remember that, gosh, that whole week I couldn't remember anything. Like everything was kind of floating around. Have a healing journal is what I call it. May it, contain nutrition information. Maybe you've got some depression and anxiety and you're tracking your mental health. But have those documents, have that journal so that when you're talking to your practitioner, you can kind of let them know what's going on. Now, I love that. But when you go to your doctor, sometimes they're going to hear something like period pain or acne or whatever, and they're going to be like, birth control of the day. LJ and Mandy, I got you. I know exactly what you need. And I do understand that. But it's also realizing that sometimes we need to kind of step up and advocate for ourselves and really move on to functional medicine. And I just did a huge talk about, diagnostic ranges, which is what your insurance and everyone usually looks at, versus functional medicine, where we want you functioning. I don't even say 100%. I need you to 110% because I need you at that 110, because whatever diagnosis is you have, they're trying to pull that 110 down. So I need you to come up a little higher so that when you have those good and bad days, you are still able to function. And so it's super important that we advocate for ourselves and then realize that functional testing is sometimes needed. And when you look at hormones, one of the biggest things that I will say, like if you don't remember anything from this podcast, that if you are testing your hormones via blood work, you need to make sure you're testing around day 19 to 21, depending on how long your cycle is, because blood work, to be honest, really isn't the most ideal way to check your hormones, number one. Number two, just testing them on whatever day you come into the office, not really going to get you the best information. You're always going to be hormonally imbalanced based on that. And then the other thing I would say is if you truly want to get the information about your hormones and how you're metabolizing them, you want to do the dried urine test. And that's, I don't know about you, Mandy, but that's my favorite, doing the Dutch test, because we want to be able to look at the hormones and know what hormone levels you have, but take it a step further to where, how is your body actually metabolizing these hormones? Who cares if you've got everything you need, but your body's like, I don't know what to do with these things. I don't know which funnel to push them down, which, we use the bathtub analogy from Dr. Carey, right? We just don't know which one to flush in, to flush out. And so I think it's really important to test. At some points, I think the symptoms are always great, but once you've been suffering for a while, we have to test and not guess. I mean, the guessing is, Dr. Google and WebMD and a couple of Pinterest pens can only take you so far in your journey. So sometimes we have to really step it up in that way.
Yeah. Yep. So a couple of things on that. One, being just, what do you do when patients don't have regular periods? So like myself, I never had a regular period. So trying to find that day 19 to 21, I was somewhere between 18 and 30 days in my cycle. So it was insanely that wide variation. How do you find that happy medium to get the right timing for testing?
Right. So when we're doing the blood work or with the dried urine. So I've got one of those right now. And I think we're kind of slipping into perimenopause. Like we don't know if the period's coming, going. I'll even say I'm right there. I'm going to be very honest. I turned 43 years old and my period was like, see ya. And my boyfriend was like, oh, this is awesome. And I'm like, no. No, like I still need my go-go juice. I don't want to have painful sex. I'm like, I need to be able to think. I also noticed when those hormones were dipping out, the period was going MIA, but so were the moods. Like 1 second I was great. Then 2 hours later, I'm in tears. I can't tell you why. No one's done anything. Everything is amazing. And then at 10 o'clock at night, I'm like ready to go all over again. Right. So it's really tracking your symptoms. And sometimes you just have to test, right? You may not find that ideal day. What I like for people to do is if your period is all over, and I'll just use it for an example. If you had a period January 1st through the 6th, and you're like, okay, it's, February, I haven't had anything, then try to go back and look and see what it would normally be. Another thing you could do, you have ovulation strips, you can check your basal body temperature. There's a lot of different things that you can do. And then also bringing in seed cycling based upon prior periods. I like to bring in the seed cycling where you start to bring in the flaxseed, the pumpkin, different things like that to somewhat regulate your cycle. But at the end of the day, you kind of know your body. If your period's all over, for example, I got to do another Dutch test. Mine's kind of too all over right now. I'm just going to have to do it. Right. Yeah. I've been waiting. It's been a while. I don't know when the period's showing up. I do feel the ups and downs in my mood. I kind of can feel the ups and downs in my hormones. So I will just have to choose the best day.
Yeah. Cool. So I went through the main parts of my endometriosis journey before learning about functional medicine. So I was one of those lucky people who went on to have a hysterectomy because of it. So that throws a whole nother wrench in that cycle. So trying to figure out when perimenopause even is, because there is no more cycle. And trying to figure out that timing wise, because I can tell you there are definitely still times when I get that hormonal boost at night and I have the brain fog and my concentration is gone. I just can't think. Plus I start breaking out like a teenager again. So I know it's there, but how does that play in? So when you're gathering somebody that's been in traditional medicine forever and now they come into this functional medicine testing.
One thing I would circle back and say is that we also have to remember, because many of us on the endo journey have been told or offered the options of Lupron and hysterectomies and things like that. And I think hysterectomies can be very beneficial for some people on their healing journey if you're having the murder scene periods or a lot of complications. But we have to remember that endometriosis is not cured by hysterectomy. So just removing your lady parts or snatching those organs out, it really isn't going to change that, because endometriosis is uterine-like tissue found outside of the uterus, causing that chronic systemic inflammation throughout the body. And like you said, those hormones are still kind of up and down. So for me as well, I didn't have a lot of the functional medicine testing. I mean, I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to say I was birth controlling and narcotics. I was doing what I could to keep on keeping on until it didn't work. So if you are moving more into where you're like, okay, I'm ready for functional medicine, I would say, yes, hormones are important, but I would start with your gut health, specifically, like I said, for that foundation, especially if you've been on hormonal birth control, possibly you've already had a hysterectomy, because once again, 70% of my patients have had a full hysterectomy. They're still bleeding, they're still cramping, they're still having all of these issues because the endometriosis lesions are still there. Not to mention PS, sorry, I have to say it, but they create their own hormones. So they're creating their own estrogen and their own progesterone. So you are still going to have those ups and downs.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that one. Even though the organs are gone, the diagnosis is not by far. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So what got you into the functional medicine part of this? After having not been in it yourself?
Correct. Right. When everything in conventional wasn't working, right. There's nothing more humbling than being a single parent and having to explain in court that you have this crazy disease and that you're not a crazy person, that you're not a bad parent, but there's something weird going on with your body that, you're right. There are days that I can't walk, but I'm still the best parent. Like I still love my children, right? A lot of those appointments, a lot of court, a lot of missing out on life, a lot of, let's say, missed opportunities. Let's talk about the financials. I was a single mother of 2 children that couldn't wake up every day and get her own children dressed, right? I was either on the news giving you all the tips about health, which I thought was helping, yet these tips stopped working for me, right? That's like a whole nother story.
Right.
Or I was stuck on the couch and couldn't walk upstairs, amazing home, but didn't have the energy. So I had to really take my life back. Like I knew there was more to it. I was appreciative for what I gotten in functional medicine or in conventional medicine, but I needed more. I needed to be able to show up for my life. I needed to be able to show up as a single parent. I wanted to show up for my business. Let's be honest. As an entrepreneur in the very beginning, you're a solopreneur. You're the marketing, you're the everything, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have the VAs and all of these fun things I have now, a medical director, a team. I was everything. So if I couldn't show up for my business, then there was no income, so it's not all about money, but I was like, I can't keep living like this, right? I want my children to stay in a college prep area, to go to college prep school, to have the savings and just to have my life. I felt like I had nothing to look forward to. I felt like my life was being put on hold by a disease, to be honest. And I don't even think I've ever said this, like something that I didn't sign up for, right? It wasn't like I was a raging alcoholic and then my liver was shot, It was like, I was healthy. I was doing all the things, I was training other people to do all the things. Yet I was really and truly just hiding in plain sight. So I really had to go back and do a lot of training because I was like, this isn't working for me. And it was really interesting. Once I got to the other side, I was like, well, I just can't go back and keep telling people. I pick on the chicken breast and broccoli, but everyone kind of knows that one, rev up your metabolism, eat 6 times a day. I'm like, I can't keep saying that, especially when people are congratulating me on a pregnancy that I'm not pregnant. I was like, this is just extreme inflammation and a belly that will, be like this and then pooch out to 9 months pregnant, for no reason whatsoever, because there's a whole cytokine inflammation war. Not to mention, I just didn't feel successful. And so I really had to, like I said, I always go back to, I had to heal myself naturally. And then I was like, there's no way I can sit on this information when everyone else out there is hiding in silence, hiding in plain sight. And then not to mention all the misconceptions running around about endometriosis.
Yeah. Yep. I think there's still not enough about it. I'll mention the word every once in a while and people are like, what is that?
Great.
So then I have to do the whole education thing. I'm like, oh, this is what happens for me, but it's not the same for everyone. But it's, and it's been just kind of running rampant in our family. I've got cousins who've now reached out to me and trying to get more information. So it's definitely out there and people are learning more about it. And I wish that I had known functional medicine when I did. It's
absolutely.
Same
here. Here.
When I learned about all the tips and tricks that functional medicine can do, because I was diagnosed with other autoimmune disease after that then too, and learning about how you can kind of fix your body from the ground up, and you don't have to rely on medications and artificial hormones in your body. It was just kind of mind blowing.
I've been there. It's eye-opening for sure. Eye-opening for sure. You're like, where have you been all my life? Literally.
Yes. So you kind of alluded to a couple different things. So what are some of the things that you do now to keep yourself healthy?
Biggest thing, supporting my detoxification pathways. For me, you may have picked up, I am definitely a type A. I'm a little bit sassy, and all that estrogen can be amazing for energy. But let me tell you, it can definitely give a girl some bad attitude, some bad acne, some chest knee, butt knee, like all over. My body just is like screaming, not to mention just that weird thing. I think I should mention that high estrogen around your cycle and where you have this histamine response, where you get very itchy, sneezy, snotty, like your whole body starts falling apart. That was me. So supporting my detox pathways, like I said, I've got my castor oil pack on right now. I love it. I love it. Like that is the one thing I recommend to everyone because it gently detoxifies your body. When you're dealing with a hormonal imbalance, I would just say anyone with a uterus, you need to have that castor oil pack because it can support your detoxification of your liver. The company, and we'll put the link that I use, they also have one for your thyroid. So like you, along the way, I started getting all these different diagnoses. I didn't know which came first, the chicken, the egg, the endo, the hypothyroidism. I think anyone that has endo somewhere along the way, you've been diagnosed with IBS IBS, which is total BS. They really just didn't know what was wrong with you, but that was the blanket that they threw us under. So, I mean, really supporting my detoxification pathways with the castor oil pack. Another thing is if you do the castor oil packs on your back, it's really great for when you're dealing with that brain fog, that adrenal fatigue, putting them on those adrenals and kidneys. I mean, once again, we have to detoxify from the head to the toe. Another thing I do to support my detox pathways is dry brushing. Okay, and let's talk about how your girl's got her dry brush right here. Very simple technique. I think sometimes when we think detoxification, we're thinking, you know, rashy from head to toe, diarrhea, sweating, you know, can't sleep for a week, and then we're detoxed. There are simple things that you can do every day to really open up those pathways. Another thing I do is lymphatic brushing, lymphatic massage, because for me personally, I had 4 sinus surgeries, and every sinus surgery, I had endometriosis lesions removed from my sinuses. So a lot of work happening, a lot of dental issues, a lot of dandruff, you know, root canals, all kinds of just crazy stuff happening from the neck up. So I have to do a lot of drainage, draining, you know, moving that lymphatic system into my lymphatic system. I know all those words, don't worry about it. Basically, we need to be detoxing from head to toe, because that really is what supports us. Think about it, right? If you have all this trash in your body, if your body's so busy, you know, working with a conveyor belt full of trash that's not moving out with your waste, with your bowel movements. I know no one wants to talk about it, but if you're not pooping 2-3 times a day, you're essentially not taking your trash out. So I do everything I can to make sure I'm taking all the trash out of my body. The other thing is sweating, movement. As much as I love, you know, working from home and being on Zoom, you know, I've got this Apple Watch my boyfriend got for me, and I'm like, I have to make sure I'm getting these steps in, making sure I'm getting in movement, because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with hormonal issues, especially endometriosis, this is a lifelong journey. So I don't do diets. You know, yes, I like to do 6-week challenges and all that kind of fun stuff, but everything I do is a lifestyle change.
Yes. And that's where I think people get kind of hung up, because we think of all the diets you can do, and you can Google a fad diet for just about anything, including endometriosis, but it's not, it is a lifestyle change. Because if you try those little dieting fads, you're going to have the ups and downs even more so than we already have on a day-to-day basis. So making those lifestyle changes, I talk to my patients about it all the time. That's where the real change is made. The medications, any supplements we do, just kind of help that.
Absolutely. I would say the other thing I do is really optimize my cycle. And so this is where I'm going to plug my freebie. If you want to turn your period into your superpower, maybe you don't have endo, maybe you're just like, LJ, I just want to kick the brain fog and the rash and the acne. I'm not saying this is a cure-all, but if you start to optimize your cycle, I think that's another thing. We always want to, I mean, we either normalize the period pain and normalize what's going on. You're just like, oh, another day in the dumps, you know, oh, I'll be gone for a week because here comes my period. Rather than doing that, if we really learn to work with our cycle, even if it's a little inconsistent, but bringing in some of those habit hacking tools and remembering that if you truly want to get rid of the brain fog and anything you're dealing with. And I also will say, if you're having brain fog, you know, it's kind of with, you know, leaky gut and then, you know, brain, you know, once again, it's all connected. So if you got a leaky gut, you probably got a leaky brain. So if you're dealing with a lot of the brain fog and all of these things like acne and migrainal headaches and hormonal headaches, et cetera, we need to support both of those pathways, but really like leaning into your period as a superpower can set you up, because most of the time we're not really thinking about our period until we're bleeding. And we have to realize that your period is something that is essentially there 24/7, is there all month long. So there are things that you can do to really set yourself up for success.
Very cool. Yeah, I wish I would have known about that a long time ago too, because that would have been great.
Right?
When I was still having periods, I would gain 10 pounds in a week. So I know that there were digestive issues going on, and had the misdiagnosis of IBS. And just had I known all of those things to do back then at that point, I think life could have been so much easier moving forward. And that's where I love this connection, because our body is not living in silos. Everything is connected. So we can talk about reproductive health and still be talking about the brain, because it's all interconnected. And especially when you're having those IBS type symptoms, you have all the bowel issues. So leaky gut absolutely can be there. and add right to that leaky brain, as you mentioned. I love that connection there. So
absolutely.
Cool.
It's true. Real talk. Been there, done that. Still on the journey.
Absolutely. So you talked about a couple of things people can do. What are some things they can do right now for our listeners that might help them just kind of get started on this healing journey?
Gosh, right now, I would say lymphatic massage. Get your lymphatic system moving. Lymphatic massage. If you have kids, if you have a trampoline, honey, go get on that trampoline, get on that rebounder, bounce it around, let it jiggle. All those let it jiggle, right? Get the body moving. That would be the biggest thing. Because like I said, sometimes when we think detoxification, we're thinking these big healing protocols. I know some of you are on Amazon right now looking for a detox. I'm telling you, get your lymphatic system going, dry brushing, and increasing your water. Now, I'm not a huge fan of tap water because that's bringing in your neighbor's birth control and all the other junk that's in the water. So that's a whole nother story. But increasing your fluids, getting your lymphatic system going, and then pooping 2 to 3 times a day. Period, point blank. I know, not the sexiest tip, but if you want to get the trash out of your body and if you really want to balance your hormones, you've got to support your liver and really get the detoxing and get the waste out. On a daily basis, not just once a week, which some people think once a week is good enough, but I'm telling you, it's not. It's just not enough.
Yeah, it's we forget the importance of that too. It does. It gets rid of the waste products. And if you're not getting rid of that, guess what? It recirculates in your body.
Yep.
So leading to a lot.
That's where you get the symptoms.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So you've got your business. What kind of projects are you working on or things that you want to share with our listeners?
Projects. Well, I am ramping up my nonprofit this year. So I've got my for-profit side, but I want to start doing more of giving back to the community. So I'm ramping up the nonprofit as far as scholarships, because I realize that everyone's budget and price point is at a different place, but the awareness and the education is still out there. I do have a huge medical conference, which I'm super excited about. I'll be coming in as the endometriosis expert, really educating all the OB-GYNs and PCPs. Because like you said, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And the more that we can raise awareness at the top, it'll start trickling all the way down to the bottom, all the way down to us patients every time that we go into the office.
And that's where we need it to be. So perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about the conference or anything else that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I love to hang out on Instagram. So LJS_powerhouse will have the link there. You can definitely go to my website, which is ljspowerhouse.org. Check me out on my podcast, the Holistic Endo Expert Podcast, holistic with a W. Lots of information, lots of freebies. Just, I would say, click all the links, get all the freebies, go to the podcast and binge. And then if you want to do the free discovery call, you can just click the link.
Perfect. And I think you sent me all those links already, so I will get those in the show notes so that people can find those easily. Very good. And I do want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything else you want to finish off with us today or leave our listeners with?
I just want to circle back to what we started with, right? Your doctor may give you the diagnosis, but you putting yourself in the driver's seat of your health, that's really going to set the tone for the prognosis. Good
final words. Very good. So thank you so much for helping me connect our reproductive health and our brain today, LJ.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Brain Wellness, the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share this with others to help me continue on with my mission to help people live healthier, happier lives. Go to www.brainwellnesssolutions.com to see what I'm up to and get links to all the social medias there. See you next time.